And I guess our fearless leaders do have a plan to deal with this situation, and that is invade Pakistan. Well, and Libya, but, Pakistan would be the big one. They're a nuclear power, big country, and the only problem is that China says an attack on Pakistan would be interpreted as an attack on China. Webster Tarpley just wrote a terrific new article about this really important strategic happening, something that hasn't happened in many decades, another power that is just about to surpass the U.S. in economic power and perhaps military power shortly thereafter, giving the U.S. an ultimatum, saying, don't carry through your war plans. This is indeed a sign of the times, and here to interpret this sign of the times is Webster Tarpley, who has done such a great job over the years in picking up on critically important international and national issues long before most other people have. He's the author of 9/11 Synthetic Terror, two critically important books on Obama, and many other excellent works, and he's increasingly in demand as a commentator on places like Russia Today and other uncensored news sites, including our own here at Truth Jihad Radio. So, hey, it's an honor to welcome back Webster Tarpley. How are you, Webster?
Slow down. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Doing well. They haven't fully invaded Pakistan yet, but how close are we to a possible war with China over Pakistan?
But we're very close. Let me first apologize for the sound. I'm in a moving car. This is the way it is today. Nothing I can do about it. An unforeseen emergency.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Well, the phase of acute danger began with this Bin Laden stunt at the beginning of May. Of course, the danger has been building up. Let me hasten to say at the beginning that the U.S. hostility to Pakistan has absolutely nothing to do with Bin Laden, war on terror, any of this nonsense. These are simply pretexts. And it's actually worth remembering that in terms of the original 9/11 false flag operation, that it started with the target being Pakistan.
That's right. You remember Musharraf got on, he told us in an interview that Bush had read in the Riot Act and said that if he didn't do everything Bush told him to do, that Bush would bomb Pakistan back to the Stone Age.
Yes, right. That it was an ultimatum actually delivered by Colin Powell and by Richard Armitage. Richard Armitage being the sort of invisible government controller for Colin Powell. And they went through a list of things they wanted. They wanted to be able to fly over Pakistan, land anywhere they wanted to, use any airport, any air base, anything of this kind. And if that didn't happen, it would be bombing. And then that was what Armitage said to Musharraf. If you don't do this, you will be living in the Stone Age. So bomb them back into the Stone Age. The U.S., therefore, was not invited. And from the point of view of Samuel Huntington and Zbigniew Brzezinski, the whole idea of 9/11 was to target Pakistan. And the objection that these people against Bush and Cheney was that they went into this Iraq sideshow fundamentally and neglected the hub of Eurasia. In other words, the place where you can control the oil flow, for example, between Iran and China, Iran and India. You can control transport from India towards Europe. This is Pakistan. It is known as the Pakistan Energy Corridor or Pipelineistan sometimes.
Right.
And the idea being that the main existential problem for China is a guaranteed overland oil supply. And the one way you could have this would be an oil pipeline from Iran up through Pakistan and then into China, above the Himalayas. So this would mean the U.S. and the British would not be able to blockade the waterways, right, the Straits of Malacca. They could not use pirates, all of these other considerations. So that's the Pipelineistan. There's also the question of the port of Gwadar, which is this tremendously important potential port where you could have tankers coming from Algeria or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or any of these places, and they could then offload the oil at Gwadar, and that could then go into China. So that's really the issue. And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, the Chinese-Pakistan alliance has been there for decades, and it's now very, very strong, stronger than any of the establishmentarians perhaps had expected.
Webster, do you think that this strategy that the U.S. has adopted of creating a phony war on terror to target Pakistan is backfiring in part because the people of Pakistan, as well as so many other places, see through the ruse and are very, very angry. You know, the people of Pakistan are more anti-American now than they've ever been because they know this whole war on terror is a hoax. So that's just, isn't that driving Pakistan out of the U.S. order?
I would distinguish between Pakistan and many other countries. In other words, the insurrections or rebellions or color revolutions in most of the other Arab countries are promoted by the CIA itself. These are destabilizations, these are color revolutions, palace coups. We can go through the details on those. But in Pakistan, as you say, it's very different. In Pakistan, this is now a national resistance. The U.S. strategy is to take the existing civil war inside Afghanistan and export that to Pakistan. The goal is to play on the animosities of the four main ethnic groups. The Pashtuns, which is more or less where the Taliban can be found, the Sinds or Sindhis, the Baluchis, and then the Pashtuns, the Baluchis, the Sinds, and the Punjabis. Those four. So the idea is to get the Pashtuns so riled up, and the Baluchis, if you can do them too, so that they go to war with the other two groups, and then you can never have these energy corridors that I talked about before. Now, the one thing we know about this May 1st bin Laden stunt, everything about it is up in the air. Everything about it has changed several times, back and forth, right?
Well, why is that?
Fight, because part of it is to lure you in to the story. They want you to get into the story, and then you're supposed to act like a literary critic or a theater critic and offer your critique of this or that little detail, and this is a waste of time. There's actually a way to be duped, right? If you don't want to be duped, stay outside the story. You know one thing about it, one thing and only one, is that Pakistan is the target. That's all you know. Everything else is susceptible to being manufactured out of whole cloth, and I don't even want to go into that stuff, unless we have time at the end.
Well, no, Webster, I agree with you completely. It was obviously a stunt, and it's obviously meant to target Pakistan, and it's part of a larger set of hoaxes, so I think we can agree on that much.
Now, here's the reason this was so dangerous is because there is this long-standing plan developed by General Stanley McChrystal before he was the Afghan commander, when he was still the commander of the Joint Special Operations Command. He developed a scenario for sending commandos, the SEAL Battalion 6 or whatever they are, right? Whatever mythical unit they're dealing with. You send them into Pakistan out of Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan and similar places. You do a surprise raid into Pakistan, and you try to seize control of the Pakistani nuclear forces. It's 100 intermediate-range ballistic missiles. It's several hundred nuclear bombs. It's the F-16s and F-15s, I guess, that can carry them, and so forth. And
this sounds completely insane. I mean, can you imagine any other nuclear power like the U.S. or France or any nuclear power allowing some foreign country to bring in paratroopers to try to grab their nuclear arsenal?
Well, and they wouldn't do it. And, of course, nobody would do this. These are the attributes of a sovereign state. And I think right now the sovereign state is looking better and better as an alternative to the chaos, tribalism, warlords, and criminal enterprises that the CIA is pushing across the Arab and Islamic world in particular, but not only. The idea, though, is that this drill is there, and it's been in the British papers, as I write in that article. Please do take a look. It's got footnotes to it. If you don't have the footnoted version, go to tarpley.net, and you can see the footnoted version. While you're there, of course, pick up some of my books, because all of this stuff, color revolutions, was predicted. But the main thing I predicted in 2007, 2008, is that the chances for a direct attack on Iran after 2008, let's say, were falling fast, and the chances for a direct attack on Pakistan were increasing.
Yeah, so you called that one right, Webster, as you often do.
I think it was not that hard. Here's what we have. Ray Davis. You may remember this case.
Do I ever? Yeah, Ray Davis is one slimeball that I'd like to get my hands on.
All right, so here we have a so-called contractor. He's supposed to be a diplomat. You look at this guy; he's a plug ugly. He's not a diplomat. He's a CIA operative, if he's anything. And the Russians, through their media, picked up in Pakistan, say that Ray Davis was into meetings with terrorists, and he was interested in getting into the hands of terrorists as much nuclear, biological, and chemical material as he could. The goal being to let those terrorists attack the U.S. forces, above all with nuclear material, a radiological dirty bomb, if you will, and then the U.S. could say, aha, your nuclear forces are not secure. We, the wonderful, magnanimous U.S., will assist you by seizing control of them. You won't have to guard them anymore. We'll take them away from you. Now, of course, at the moment when Pakistan is stripped of its nuclear weapons, it then becomes subject to an attack from India.
Right.
And one of the tragedies of this entire thing is India, great nation, great culture, tremendous traditions in the non-aligned, going back to Nehru and Indira Gandhi. They have succumbed to the temptation of the U.S.-India nuclear accord, which it aims, at least, at making them into cannon fodder for the Anglo-Americans on the Eurasian landmass. They're supposed to become the continental dagger against China, against Pakistan, against Iran, or perhaps against others. And I would always urge India, don't do this, stop now. Look at what happened to the allies of the British in World War I. They were torn to shreds. Don't want this for yourself. This is really a bad idea. And many reasons for not doing it.
More Indians are starting to see through some of this because
I hope so.
Some of them do. The false flag terror issue is so important here. They've shown that a lot of these extremist Muslim attacks, quote unquote, were actually arranged by Indian intelligence and Israeli intelligence acting on behalf of the Anglo-Americans.
Yeah, but don't even go further. We have David Headley. We have the Mumbai. The most spectacular one is the Mumbai attack. That was in Thanksgiving 2008. I believe, right after Obama won the election, by our calculation here. So David Headley from Chicago is an agent of the Drug Enforcement Administration and of the CIA. He doesn't need the Israelis. He doesn't need the RAW. He directed that attack.
That's
he was the brains of it. He was the mastermind, the rear echelon, whatever they call these people. And this is amazing because there are trials going on now where that same Headley testifies, and he gets up there and says, the Pakistani ISI is responsible for terrorism. And look who's talking. The CIA DEA agent who actually carried out this huge massacre of, 150 people in Mumbai, which is part of this entire calculation. So
I would hope the Indian people would really be paying attention to these things.
I hope so, too. And I'm not capable of commenting how much they believe it. Certainly that Headley thing opened the eyes of many people in India as to what is really going on. But then again, it's complex. Anyway, this need not concern us at the moment, except to say we really need to know more. So we're basically left with the idea is the U.S. has a plan to use precisely the sort of cross-border raid that we saw with this bin Laden stunt. It's very interesting that Obama knew that could have led to a shooting war. And there's even a report in that article of mine at Tarpley.net or other places where it's reported that Obama was aware that this could turn into a shooting war, meaning that his handlers, his palace guard was aware, and that therefore he wanted to have forces in reserve in case the Pakistanis started shooting right away, which they were very likely to do because the Pakistanis were very likely to see it as the cross-border grab against their nuclear forces because those are quite nearby in this military area. So this was a piece of absolute folly. Now the question is, the Pakistanis are demanding no more Predator drones. The Pakistani parliament meeting in joint session has said, we want these Predator drone attacks on civilians to stop, and if you don't do that, we will block your supply line. You have a supply line that goes through our country, Pakistan, from Karachi in the southeast to the Khyber Pass in the northwest. That's all Pakistani territory. Dear U.S., stop killing our civilians or we will cut your supply line. By the way, if we want to comment on the lunacy of the Anglo-American establishment, this is an example that you're picking a fight, a war, with a country where your supply line runs through that country. What sense does this make? Obviously none at all. So that's one thing. And then we've got General Kayani, the head of the Pakistani military, saying, "You better not do this again. This was a real misadventure, and I'm going to cut your forces here. You're not allowed to have as many forces." The problem, of course, is there are an estimated minimum 7,000 CIA agents, and the Pakistani government...
They're going to have to track those people down and kick them out. When you're talking about a possible shooting war between the U.S. and Pakistan and possibly China, what worries me the most is that in the past we've seen this phenomenon of powers deciding to do preemptive wars. In other words, the British Empire went after Germany before Germany got stronger than them in the early part of the 20th century. And, one worries about whether the U.S. British Zionist Empire might want to have a shooting war with China earlier rather than later, before China becomes more powerful. Do you see that as a risk?
Well, the insanity of the Anglo-American elite knows no bounds, and they are really off the deep end because their capital structures, right, their derivatives empire is indeed collapsing across the world, and that's one of the reasons they're on this rampage, right? The goal of the CIA in particular and the State Department is to destroy every existing nation-state. And the basic idea is where you can, you foment color revolutions which lead either to tribalism or warlords or chaos or criminal syndicates of the Kosovo type, the KLA or UCK
right,
or whatever they call it there. And in Pakistan, though, Pakistan is the, as you say, fifth largest country in the world, nuclear weapons. It's a harder nut to crack. So you can't attack Pakistan directly. They would if they could. But Pakistan is like Iraq. It's not even like Iran. They have nuclear weapons right now, not hypothetical, but really existing. So what you're seeing with Pakistan is a use of guerrilla warfare and terrorism and irregular warfare, otherwise known as oblique warfare, below the nuclear threshold as a way to attack a nuclear power. Now, the goal of it, of course, is to destroy Pakistan, also because it is one of the main strategic allies of China. China has attempted to assemble this string of pearls across the Indian Ocean, right? They have strong interests in Thailand, in Burma. That's why those countries are under color revolution attack. You can also look at, say, Libya. There were 50,000 Chinese workers in Libya doing a lot of work with the oil that was very important for China. They've been driven out as a result of the destabilization of Libya by the CIA. So the goal is to weaken systematically China's allies and to destroy them, if possible, one by one. However, this has now been interrupted by this ultimatum, which the Chinese issued 2.5 weeks ago, which most of the U.S. mainstream press has simply ignored, although as a result of my article, I believe this has crept into some right-wing blogs. Hot Air, for example, a very nasty reactionary blog. They've covered it, right, and some others have covered it. It's also been written up, apart from me, in the Tehran Times. They had an article by this character, Pepe Escobar, of the very dubious Asia Times. He talks about the ultimatum. So the ultimatum was reported in the Pakistani press, and that's where I found it, and also in the Indian press, in the Times of India, their economic section. And you can see the reference and follow the reference in that article on that I have at Copley.net. So as far as I can see, it's the first time in about, 50 years that the United States has been on the receiving end of an ultimatum. And it basically says that when the Chinese sent their top representatives to Washington about 2.5 weeks ago now for the U.S.-Chinese strategic dialogue, the Chinese delivered an ultimatum in their typical way, not bombastic, not public, not designed to humiliate, but very discreet, very polite, but unmistakable. If you Americans insist on attacking Pakistan, we will regard that as an attack on China. If